Hey Guy, today we're diving into a topic loved by many. Sword warriors, Bushido, or, most famously, the samurai. These samurai warriors, with their unwavering spirits and razor-sharp blades, have captured imaginations for centuries. Let's explore the journeys of these legendary samurai together. Listen to the entire story, and if you enjoy it, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more great tales. When the first rays of dawn break over the plains of Honshu, gentle light spreads across the land, awakening not only people, but also the stories slumbering in the memory of the land of the rising sun. It is precisely at this moment of union between lingering darkness and fresh light that the journey back to the origins of the samurai class begins. From its early stirrings in the 8th century to the first sketches of the warrior spirit, Bushido. By the end of the Nara period, 710–794, Japan was on course to assimilate Eastern cultures via the Silk Road and diplomatic ties with China's Tang Empire. With an increasingly complex bureaucratic system, the imperial court required a loyal, skilled armed force rather than untrained peasant levies. Thus, from powerful households in outlying provinces, native warriors were chosen and remunerated with land, rice, or other privileges. They began to appear under the name saburai, literally those who serve, or attendants, within the court's administrative and military apparatus. During this period, saburai still functioned as administrative staff who were also warriors. They escorted officials on their duties, patrolled the borders, or took part in sporadic anti-bandit expeditions. But gradually their role shifted to focus on combat skills. At first, the saburai typically fought with spears and bows and arrows, and wore light armour of leather or cloth reinforced with iron plates. Martial training was still rudimentary, learned primarily through real combat experience rather than formalised techniques or spiritual discipline. By the late 9th and early 10th centuries, when the Heian period, 794–5, officially began, the distant provinces where the central government's influence was weaker started organising their own armies. Local lords called gozoku, or kuni no miyatsuko, mobilised the saburai on site to protect farmlands, trade routes and local order. As conflicts between clans grew increasingly frequent, the saburai were compelled to train as true warriors. The Heian period also witnessed the rise of famed warrior clans such as Taira and Minamoto. These two houses vied for power in the capital Heian-kyo, today's Kyoto, culminating in the Genpei War, 1180–1185. In that fierce conflict, the image of samurai cavalry, mounted warriors clad in indigo armour, armed with bows and arrows, swords and spears, became legendary. It marked the transformation from the loyal saburai into the more combative professional bushi. The Genpei War ended with Minamoto no Yoritomo's victory and the establishment of the Kamakura Shogunate, 1182–1333, signalling the end of the imperial court's absolute centralised monarchy and the dawn of samurai feudalism. From that point on, samurai were not merely soldiers, but the ruling class, wielding control of the country through the shogunate. The title of shogun, military commander, was conferred upon Yoritomo, marking the advent of a military government parallel to the imperial court. Under the aegis of the Kamakura Shogunate, samurai were granted land and autonomous rights, forming the shoen system of feudal estates. They not only farmed these lands but also oversaw tax collection, judged local disputes, and organised regional armed forces. In return, they were charged with maintaining order and standing ready for military campaigns whenever the shogunate called. This duty carried an intangible honour, planting the seeds of Bushido, the way of the warrior. Bushido, although not fully conceptualised until the Edo period, 1603–1868, already showed its early outlines at this stage. Absolute loyalty to one's lord, a sense of righteousness, courage in combat, and ironclad discipline, even during the precarious conflict between Kamakura and the Southern Song Alliance. when samurai had to repel Mongol pirates, 1274-1281. The spirit of self-sacrifice for one's master, the willingness to die on the battlefield rather than suffer defeat, took deep root in every warrior's heart. Returning to that very first dawn, when the sun's rays first brushed the spear tips and sword blades, the initial samurai may still have been hazy about his true mission. Yet over time, through each battle, each life or death decision, the samurai's form emerged ever more clearly, from a saburai serving the court to a bushi, embodying both moral code and martial prowess. Tales of loyalty to their masters, of clashes against the Mongols, of welcoming Chinese envoys gradually fed into the collective memory, nurturing pride and discipline. In the silence before the full sunrise, the eyes of that first samurai turned eastward, as if glimpsing the journey of an entire warrior caste, weathering history's storms, cherishing every ounce of glory and honour. Then his slow footsteps echoed over the gravel path toward the town centre, where the clan's Mon flag fluttered, announcing a new epoch, the era of the samurai. The morning sunlight still lingered on the maple leaves before the gates of Kamakura as the samurai's straw sandals crunched crisply over the stone-paved path. The air was cool, yet charged with tension, for everyone was keenly aware that their duty was not only to defend the land, but also to uphold the honour of the newly born warrior class. In the shogunate's hall, advisors and samurai commanders assembled, letters from the capital Heian in hand, to discuss laws and strategy, dividing the estates, setting the military tax, and preparing measures to counter the enemy. Within the solemn circle, Minamoto no Yoritomo, the general appointed as shogun, listened to each report on the border's security situation. The sound of horse hooves and the rush of wind through the wooden doors echoed steadily, as if reminding them that the world beyond was harsher than any council chamber. Yoritomo gave a slight nod, then instructed his junior commanders to survey the Kujo and Sagami regions, where legends of wandering outlaws still lingered in every mountain crevice. Narrow trails winding through bamboo groves led to scattered villages, where samurai had to carry out their official duties while maintaining close ties with the common people. Studying Chinese tactics, the samurai quickly realized that Japan's terrain did not permit the wholesale use of goosewing or bagua formations. Instead, they devised a deliberate retreat tactic, simultaneously exploiting the agility of their archers and the striking power of their mobile cavalry. During extended training drills, the young samurai first learned to coordinate their units. Spear bearers would clear the path, archers on both flanks would close in, and finally the cavalry would strike from ambush. This technique later became the hallmark of the Kamakura school, helping secure victory against the Mongol land and naval forces. In July of the Gyapthin year, 1274. As the seas around Tsushima swelled, the Mongol armoured fleet descended, bearing the acrid scent of pitch and heavy gunpowder smoke. The war drum known as mokouchi thundered all through the night, rousing samurai spirits amid the downpour. The Battle of Hakata Bay proved a true test of life and death. Archers aboard the small Japanese vessels rained arrows onto the mighty Mongol ships, pinning them to their red banners. When the northeast wind rose, it seemed heaven itself intervened. Fierce gusts capsized many Mongol warships into the deep. Folk legend would call this the kamikaze, the divine wind that defended the homeland. But to the samurai, the triumph owed itself to courage and ceaseless training. Returning to Kamakura, the elite force bore spoils of war and news of the glorious naval battles. In the shogunate's hall, young samurai listened attentively to the teachings of veteran masters, the importance of discipline, keeping one's promise to the commander lord, and above all, not allowing fear to dominate. Tales of comrades' sacrifices, broken swords, or shields rent to shreds did not make them falter. On the contrary, they imprinted in their hearts an ironclad will. In the years that followed, the samurai gradually extended their influence, not only on the battlefield, but also in everyday life. They took part in negotiations with local chieftains, resolved disputes over land, and instructed the populace in farming methods, conceding to the rhythms of rain to stave off famine. The legal code Goseibai Shikimoku, promulgated in 1232, recorded many crucial edicts. Samurai who unlawfully killed were to face severe punishment, but if acting under their Lord General's orders, they were absolved. This reinforced the principle of absolute loyalty, even when it forced them into the painful position of wielding their blade against an enemy's kin. Between the strict rhythm of life, there were still moments of relaxation. On the tatami mats, the warriors gathered to challenge one another in martial contests and the way of the sword. The long katana flashed in the dawn light, carving silence through the air before slicing through every other sound. Each cut, each step had to be fixed in the mind. Quick, but not rushed. Powerful, but restrained. Mastery of swordsmanship became an even nobler symbol, proof of the harmonious union of spirit and body. Not only that, but gagaku music and bugaku dance were favoured by the samurai as a way to balance their emotions. At banquets in the camps, the gentle flute blended with the rhythmic drums, transporting listeners into a dreamlike realm. They believed that through these arts, a steadfast spirit would be reinforced, preventing them from falling into extreme violence while still preserving the dignity of the armoured warrior. When night fell, samurai often retired to the dojo to meditate and endure rigorous training. The scent of incense candles filled the air, mingling with slow, measured breathing. It is said that in the silence the warrior could hear the wind whispering through bamboo leaves, a reminder of life's impermanence. They practiced the ritual of seppuku, not to seek death, but to affirm that living in cowardice is worse than dying. Strength of will, unwavering loyalty, and the readiness to lay down one's life for honour became the guiding principles of every action. Gradually, this value system was passed down from generation to generation. In every village, the story of the clan's heroic samurai was retold by the fireside, stirring pride in the children. Parents taught their offspring that the sword was not merely a weapon, but also proof of purity and integrity. As the old guard of samurai gradually stepped down, the next generation had grown up, carrying with them a precious legacy. A warrior class endowed with supreme combat skill, yet mindful of humanity. Alongside strengthening internal governance, the Kamakura Shogunate faced challenges from within, conflicts among the Minamoto lineages, and power struggles between the imperial court and the shogun. Small uprisings erupted, forcing samurai to choose absolute loyalty to the shogun or protection of clan interests. Such decisions sometimes left deep scars, yet they also marked the maturation of Bushido, where allegiance was prized even above familial bonds. In the biting morning mist, the samurai cavalry resumed their daily regimen, practicing archery on horseback, honing their swordsmanship before a water mirror, and attending court assemblies to devise plans for the people's welfare. They understood that only by harmonizing compassion with martial strength could they truly deserve the title of the warrior monk that was taking shape. And from those earliest days, through storms and peace alike, the samurai caste engraved its name upon Japanese history, preparing for the turbulent and glorious paths that lay ahead. Morning light streams through the wooden window frame, revealing thin wisps of mist on the moss-covered tiles of the samurai compound. No one speaks yet, only the rustle of wind outside the bamboo fence, a reminder that every breath must be cherished. From the main hall, soft footsteps echo steadily as the samurai, each representing their clan, line up meticulously and exchange respectful nods before entering the anteroom to preliminarily discuss the distribution of duties for the harvest season and preparations for the ritual at the Kamakura shrine. In late autumn, when the maple leaves change colour, the samurai convene to plan the organisation of granaries, ensuring that rice is distributed fairly to both soldiers and civilians. The young military overseer, After presenting in detail his proposal to establish additional storehouses in the Awa region, quietly folds his supplemental memorial, making small adjustments and accepting feedback from the elders. In the eyes of the Taira clan's patriarch, there is a mingling of pride and concern. Pride that the younger generation has come of age, yet unease over troubling signals from the old capital, Heian, where the imperial court's overtures toward peace with the Mongols risk undermining some of the samurai's hard-won honour. Amid this solemn gathering, the clear clang of metal resonates from the chamber behind, the sound of a famed swordsmith at work, the freshly forged blade, still glowing red, requires a prolonged tempering in cold water to achieve its resilience. With each dip, the scent of charcoal smoke drifts through the air, reminding all that the katana is more than a weapon. It is the sacred emblem of the family line, the sole link between the living and their departed ancestors. Immediately after the important meeting, the samurai split into two groups. One group descended to the village of Mutsu to investigate suspected unjust tax farming, and the other climbed Mount Oyama to visit the Zen monasteries. Communicating with the monks not only helped the samurai cultivate their temperament, but also reinforced the link between martial arts and meditation. The foundational premise for harmony between body and mind, between the sword and stillness. Along the dirt path leading to the monastery, the rhythmic sound of the temple bell in the high monk's hands awakened a sense of tranquility. The samurai sat in the stone lecture hall, listening to a dharma talk on impermanence and no self, realizing that a warrior's life was not confined solely to the battlefield, but also lay in how one transcends oneself. Perhaps they wondered whether defeating the external enemy was any more important than conquering inner temptations. Returning to camp in the final sunset of the day, a small auction was held. Precious items presented by Mongol hostages after the Battle of Hakata, such as ivory pendants, hand-woven silk scarves, or rare stream stones. The samurai traded and bid with rice or the national seal, but the atmosphere was far from a marketplace. It carried the solemnity of a medal ceremony. To them, material wealth was secondary. What truly mattered was tradition and the covenant between warrior and lord, between person and person. Late at night, the metal chains of the halberd tapped evenly on their rack, and an oil lamp illuminated a corner of the sword training room. A breeze slipped through a crack, causing the curtain to flutter, but the samurai did not waver. They neatly arranged their walking meditation implements, then sat in the lotus posture in turn. Each warm breath exhaled, each heartbeat echoed in their chests, all in harmony in the silent space where each individual confronted himself. Time inevitably flows on, and the samurai camp gradually sinks into a brief slumber before daybreak. Yet the warrior's soul never lets the flame of battle die out. In their dreams they hear the sound of horse hooves, see banners fluttering atop sand dunes, and feel the sword in hand cleave through the chains of hatred. And in that very moment, the longing for honour and freedom transforms into a fierce instinct, ready to erupt when dawn breaks once again. The days ahead will bring new challenges, from quelling internal mutinies to hosting diplomatic missions from China and Korea, each encounter demanding that the samurai excel not only in martial prowess, but also in courtly protocol and diplomatic language. Yet whatever the circumstances, the original tradition of the faithful servant has evolved into the warrior of the way, a true samurai, with the mirror of Bushido illuminating the path of dedication and preserving their very essence. And in that charged atmosphere, as the sun prepares to awaken a new day, the samurai stand firm atop the ramparts, hand lightly resting on the sword's hilt, eyes fixed on the distant horizon, quietly affirming that today's honour will be the legacy handed down to future generations. In the wind whistling through the leaves, one seems to hear the words of their predecessors. A samurai never forgets the price of freedom, nor ever forgets his duty. Thus, the final lines of the first chapter are etched into each heart, paving the way for the chapters to come, full of upheaval and glory. the sky turned a pale rose as Ashikaga Takauji's retinue advanced across the boundless rice paddies, the morning mist still clinging to the young stalks. In that first light, the lacquered armour of his samurai sparkled, reflecting the resolve and ambition of a warrior class determined to assert a new status. Takauji, once shoulder to shoulder with the Kamakura Shogunate, now betrayed the Son of Heaven and established the Muramachi Shogunate in Kyoto, opening a turbulent new chapter in samurai history. In the early 14th century, as Kamakura's central authority wavered, the country entered the Nambokucho era, an age of northern and southern courts. Regional samurai raced to choose sides, swearing fealty to either the northern or southern emperor. The battles of the Taiheki were fought not only on the field, but in every samurai's heart. They weighed local duty against loyalty to their lord. Day by day, terse summons or veiled threats circulated, each accompanied by reminders of honour and the painful consequences of breaking one's oath. Along the road to the new capital, Muramachi's samurai displayed to roadside villagers an administrative apparatus blending courtly ceremony with military style. They bore the national seal, paper fans inscribed with edicts and banners embroidered with the Ashikaga crest. The people gazing up at lines of spear-bearing warriors felt both awe and hope, believing that the age of upheaval was ending, to be replaced by the order protected by blade and bow. Yet new power was not always rosy. On the fringes of Omiya palace councils, where Takauji met with his commanders, whispered gossip about personal ambition and family vendettas drifted through the corridors. The Hatakeyama clashed with the Hosokawa, the Uesugi with the Yamana. Samurai clans turned the shogunate into a power arena, recruiting soldiers, ambushing rivals at night, and forging fragile alliances through marriage or land grants. Amid this turmoil, samurai culture left deep marks. Renga poetry, the tea ceremony, and the art of flower appreciation, kado, became means for warriors to demonstrate learning and refinement alongside their fighting prowess. Camp banquets were not only times for sweet wine and cherry blossoms, but venues where samurai challenged each other to compose verse. A striking haikai could earn as much prestige as a decisive victory on the battlefield. Battle techniques also evolved. The arrival of the matchlock gun, Tanegashima, in the mid-16th century, proved a turning point. The bow and spear gave way to shoulder-loaded firearms that could fire through enemy ranks. Samurai initially hesitated, deeming the matchlock an dishonourable weapon, but as Ashigaru foot soldiers mastered its destructive power, they were forced to adapt, training new mixed units that combined mounted swordsmen and spearmen with gun-armed infantry. The first clash where matchlocks decided the outcome came at Nagashino, 1575, where Oda Nobunaga's volley lines of gunners halted Takeda cavalry in its tracks. The crack of volleys and the billow of smoke stunned and terrified the enemy. Thereafter, victories piled up for the modernizers, proving that samurai could no longer rely solely on the sword to dominate new technologies. Bushido itself was tested, to preserve honour without losing the ability to adapt. That transformation ushered in the Sengoku, Warring States period, a century-long fragmentation into countless domains ruled by local warlords. Samurai fought traditional battles even as they studied Chinese tactics, employed cannons and siegecraft, built ramparts and moats, and learned negotiation to preserve their forces. Their concerns extended beyond defeating foes to protecting territory, sustaining agriculture, and preventing famine. The populace of that age bore heavy taxes to finance wars and witnessed imposing samurai parades. To many, the armoured horseman, sword or matchlock in hand, embodied unquestionable power. Yet tragic tales of families torn apart and villages razed reminded samurai of their master's teaching. A true warrior knows when to fight and when to show mercy. As the Sengoku era waned under the unifying force of Toyotomi Hideyoshi and ultimately Tokugawa Ieyasu, the samurai entered the Edo period, an era of long-lasting peace. But that is the story of the next chapter. For now, as sunlight floods the fields and forests once shrouded in war, every step of the Muramachi samurai still bears the imprint of tempests past, forming an indomitable epic of Japan's warrior caste. The sunset light draped softly over the curved eaves of Ashikaga Castle, staining the maple outside the courtyard a blazing red. In the main courtyard, the steady tap of footsteps on the wooden floor echoed as the samurai of the Hatakeyama, Hosokawa, and Yamana clans gathered, awaiting Shogun Takauji's summons. The air was heavy with unceasing clan rivalries, each exchanged glance at once respectful and wary. Inside the principal chamber, flickering candlelight danced across the painted walls, depicting the heroic battles of their ancestors. Takauji sat upon an intricately carved wooden throne, silently studying each face. He knew that to preserve his power, he must deftly reconcile the factions. His opening words were brief. "We cannot allow the northern-southern court conflict to continue sowing division. This time, we must find a common solution for the future of the shogunate." Immediately, Hosokawa Katsumoto, a middle-aged commander seasoned by many battles, rose to speak. His voice was warm yet persuasive. "If the shogun permits, I will serve as mediator between Hatakeyama and Yamana. Summon representatives of both houses at once, and resolve their disputes through an election for provincial chief." The idea sounded unusually democratic, but Katsumoto hoped it would ease clan tensions without weakening central authority. This proposal drew cautious support from some younger samurai, but it provoked fierce opposition from Yamana Sozan. Elderly, and once the de facto ruler of Izumo, he refused to risk his influence in any contest. Yamana growled, "I have shed blood to uphold the shogunate. Shall I be debased by standing on equal footing with my old enemies?" His words fell upon the hall, rendering it breathlessly silent. Takauji pressed his lips together, maintaining calm. "I judge no one above another. Our sole aim is internal peace. Without it, the shogunate digs its own grave." He poured a cup of sake, lifted it in a gentle toast, and drank deeply, easing the tension. The clink of porcelain against wood reverberated like thunder, foretelling a momentous decision. At last, Takauji decreed the formation of the Kano Council, comprising 6 respected elder generals without clan allegiance, charged with drafting a plan to restructure the shogunate. This would both diffuse individual power and underpin a new legal code due the following year. The council would convene quarterly to resolve conflicts and report directly to the shogun. News of the Kano Council spread across the provinces, offering hope to the people. In regions scarred by brutal warfare, villagers once again saw samurai patrolling the roads, safeguarding security, aiding with harvests, and repairing damage from floods. On many occasions, shogunate survey teams ventured into remote hamlets, establishing small posts, distributing rice to avert famine, and gathering intelligence on rebel gatherings. During this time, Zen culture, already entwined with the samurai, flourished under the patronage of enlightened commanders. At Enkakuji Temple near Kamakura, Zen master Muso Soseki began teaching the concept of formless mind, emphasizing that a warrior who would conquer on the battlefield must first conquer himself. He urged samurai to practice the silent tea ritual, drinking tea without words, to focus entirely on the present moment, dispelling anxiety and desire. Gradually, the tea ceremony implements, chadogu, became heirlooms passed from generation to generation within samurai families, symbolizing humility and refinement. At intimate tea gatherings among daimyo, samurai clad in plain kimonos sat solemnly on tatami, performing each gesture of tea preparation with deliberate care. The hiss of boiling water, the tap of wooden ladles, and the measured breath of each participant blended into a hushed symphony that drew every thought toward the here and now. Not only Zen and tea, but the art of no drama also permeated Muramachi samurai life. Traditional plays with wooden masks and resplendent costumes dramatized the tragedies of noble warriors or the vengeful curses of restless spirits. On stage, actors moved slowly, each footstep echoing on the wooden boards, candlelight casting haunting shadows. The audience sat in absolute silence, hearing only the bamboo flute and small drum, imbuing each tale with the breath of human emotion. Amid this cultural wave, encouraged by the shogun and his commanders, the samurai identity gradually transformed. No longer solely fierce warriors, but guardians of civilization. The image of a samurai bearing sword, and in other hands the tea whisk, chosen, became familiar. Sometimes one even saw them seated on tatami, studying Confucian classics, debating the teachings of Confucius and Mencius, seeking self-understanding through scholarship rather than the crucible of war. However, darkness never wholly vanished. Old rivalries smouldered, sometimes flickering like storm clouds over a placid sky. Lower-ranked ashigaru occasionally rebelled, extorting extra taxes from villagers and causing unrest. The central government had to station elite troops repeatedly to quash uprisings and reinforce its authority. This proved the Muramachi shogunate's discipline and adaptability. Delay, and they risked losing control of their own homeland. Amid these ups and downs, Takauji would sometimes sit alone in the painted chamber, map of ancient Japan in hand, his gaze tracing each province as he pondered the legacy he would leave. He knew that the samurai monument is built not only by victories, but by the ability to maintain peace through culture and learning. And before the final candle guttered out, he would murmur, "The warrior's path is long, but let every step not only resound with the sword's edge, but also echo the wisdom of our forebears." The dawn light filtered through the paper window pane of the meeting room in Muramachi Castle, casting warm golden patches across the painted walls. Yet even in that peaceful moment, the northeast wind still carried the chill of brewing conflicts into every stone of the courtyard. The sound of horses' hooves faded, replaced by the hurried footsteps of high ministers returning to their residences, where Ashikaga's greatest crisis was about to erupt. News of the Onin rebellion had reached Takauji. The Yamana and Hatakeyama clans were once again at odds, this time not merely vying for shogunate authority, but raising armies to march upon the capital itself. An urgent mobilization order sounded throughout the provinces. Samurai must muster at once, bearing both bow and matchlock, ready to plunge into a decade-long civil war. The people of Kyoto, witnessing columns of smoke rising from marketplace fires, realized for the first time that even the serene capital could not escape the storm of war. The fighting inside the city defied the formal scripts of ceremony. At night, the clash of steel rang out from narrow alleys, enemies separated by nothing more than a bamboo screen. Samurai on horseback charged through side streets, seizing enemy clan banners and vanishing into the darkness. Matchlocks were used in urban combat for the first time. Choking clouds of gunsmoke blotted out the moon, plunging the city into panic and mourning. Takauji ordered trusted generals to fall back to Kamakura to reinforce their forces, while he remained in Kyoto to organize the defense. Night after night, he stood guard on the ramparts, listening to whispered reports from sentries about the situation beyond the walls. At times he wondered, can the Ashikaga shogunate preserve samurai honor in such chaos? The Onin War ended, but before its embers cooled, the country had splintered into countless Sengoku daimyo domains, each lord declaring himself master of his lands, seizing fields and prestige. Samurai no longer served the shogun alone. They became mercenary captains for whichever lord offered land or marriage alliances. Loyalty shifted like sediment on a riverbed, and warrior honor was sometimes weighed against the imperative of survival. Amid this turmoil, legendary figures emerged. Oda Nobunaga, who vowed to burn away the old order to rebuild. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who rose from diking ditches to general, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, who patiently accumulated power in the shadows. Samurai who once formed ranks before the Ashikaga shogun now chose sides, bargaining pay in land or alliance, and even swearing fealty by offering their daughters in marriage to rival clans. The drumbeats that would sound at Sekigahara were drawing near, preceded by sieges at Azuchi, new fortress construction, and the adoption of Sankin-kotai, the system requiring regional lords to alternate residence at the central camp. All this squeezed the Ashikaga to the breaking point. They could not hold military command and were gradually eclipsed by the political savvy of Toyotomi and then Tokugawa. At his final council in Kyoto, Takauji gazed upon moss-covered rooftops, ancient walls, and parched moats, signs that the golden age had passed. With a sigh, he returned the shogunal seal to the emperor and departed for Kamakura, where rumours of a false shogun spread like wildfire. The old samurai quietly sheathed their swords along the walls, or some removed their armour entirely to become imperial officials, blending into the urban elite rising from the ashes of war. Along the route back to Edo, samurai loyal to the Minamoto twice paused to look toward the horizon, where valleys stretched beneath the morning sun. Distant hearth smoke carried the scent of freshly cooked rice, a reminder that despite the turns of history, life continued. Children's laughter by the riverside, kites soaring overhead, and the face of an elderly silk weaver by the well, all called samurai back to their duty, protecting the peace of the people. When they stood shoulder to shoulder one last time in the Ashikaga encampment, there was no grand farewell, only shared, silent glances, understanding that one era's end heralded another's beginning. The old blades were tucked into wooden scabbards, memories of Muramachi's tea ceremonies beneath willow trees, and no performances in the quiet of night would echo forever in a warrior's heart. The final days of Ashikaga, Takauji passed in quiet reflection as he witnessed the nation reunify under Tokugawa's hand. Yet in that historic moment of transition, the true samurai ideal, warrior and scholar, solemn yet compassionate, painted the final triumph of Japan's feudal age. And from there, the peaceful Edo era, the land of flourishing roads and rivers, began to unfold, opening a new chapter in the samurai's enduring story. The dawnlight broke over the horizon as smoke from the villagers' hearths dispersed, unveiling a new vista of the realm toward which samurai from every corner were gathering. Owari Province. At the Inabayama stronghold, Oda Nobunaga, the ambitious young general, gazed out over the lands awaiting unification. With a short wakizashi sheathed at his side and lightweight lacquered armour of deep crimson plating his torso, he told himself that the new era demanded both strength and uncompromising change. In the 1560s, the battlefields of central Japan resonated with the thunder of newly imported matchlock firearms. The Battle of Okahazama unexpectedly became a turning point. With only a few hundred cavalry, Nobunaga used a sudden downpour to conceal his ambush within a bamboo grove, then struck the vastly superior Imagawa coalition. The first shot rang out, bullets tearing into enemy ranks, and panic spread as swiftly as a wildfire through dry grass. That miracle not only yielded spoils and the province of Mino, but cemented the reputation of a samurai who fused traditional tactics with new technology. Victory at Okahazama cleared Nobunaga's path to crush rival strongholds. The Azai, Asakura, and Miyoshi clans submitted one by one. He spared no hesitation in burning their castles and uprooting their ancestral trees to forestall rebellion. But he did not rely on fire alone. He enacted his recruit the talented policy, enlisting both warriors and scholars, granting land and privileges to loyal samurai, regardless of low birth. Under the Hexa banner, his ranks swelled with a rare professional force. At the same time, Nobunaga strengthened foreign trade with Portuguese and Spanish merchants, transforming Nagasaki into Europe's gateway. Merchant ships laden with silk, gunpowder, bronze bells, and magnifying lenses docked, introducing his samurai to new worlds of science, technology, and faith. Many of his commanders quickly embraced the matchlock, light and powerful, and traditional cavalry, once reliant on horse and spear, evolved into mixed firearm units. Amid this whirlwind, Nobunaga erected the astonishing Azuchi Castle, 7 stories tall, intricately carved wood, pure white walls, embossed with dragon and festival motifs, crowning a hilltop. Inside lay a grand banquet hall, where gagaku musicians and bugaku dancers entertained warriors and courtiers alike. This fusion of stillness and motion embodied his philosophy. Samurai must not only fight, but be versed in culture, erudite enough to lead the people. Yet conquest never followed a smooth path. Discontented factions lurked in the shadows, plotting his assassination. On hush-wrapped nights, Nobunaga narrowly evaded poisoned arrows under his eaves, or foiled stealthy ninjas wielding hidden bows. Vigilance was taut as a bowstring. He understood that great power bred great peril, but also proved who truly wielded the reins. By 1568, Nobunaga rode triumphantly into Kyoto. At Omiya Palace, he aided Ashikaga Yoshiaki's restoration, then exploited the young shogun's weakness to carry out reforms, scrapping corrupt tariffs, redistributing lands, and curbing certain clerical privileges of the Tendai sect. Villagers looked on in both fear and hope, while Nobunaga's loyal samurai acted as an iron fist, ready to quash any insurrection. With each captured castle, he erected a commemorative stele. Under the Hexa banner, justice and order reborn, samurai abandoned their old standards, knelt and swore fealty, and received instruction in new arms, from matchlocks to bronze cannon. He even founded a state armory, drawing master smiths from across the land to forge katana of laminated sanmai steel, both supple and unbreakable. But Nobunaga did err. His ruthless campaign against Enryakuji, destroying over 2,000 Tendai monks to end clerical political power, stirred deep resentment. The Azai clan, closely tied to the monastery, joined forces with the local 18 kings to strike Azuchi. In the ensuing chaos, Nobunaga nearly perished, but his retreat to the fortress reinforced the samurai ethos. Prestige and mercy must march together, or one's legacy lies buried. Through long, restless nights, Nobunaga stared at the star-flecked sky, pondering the nature of authority. He absorbed the Zen teaching of victory through humility, meditating beneath moonlight to cleanse his spirit of worldly dust. Many trusted samurai became disciples of Ikkyu, seeking balance between conquest and compassion. The morning sun bathed Azuchi Castle in a vibrant glow. Orders rang out, urging the guards to polish their weapons, while the Ashigaru diligently loaded matchlock powder into barrels. Below the ramparts, a sparkling stream carried cool mist through the air, a reminder that however mighty their arms, life must be nourished by nature's warmth. Nobunaga appeared on the courtyard in a simple samyu, receiving visitors with the grace of a lord, his gaze still radiating command. Today he had summoned representatives from Mino, Owari, and Omi to discuss building a new trade road network from Azuchi through Uji to Yamashiro, designed to speed supplies of food and arms. Muddy earth tracks would be improved with stone paving, wooden bridges, and way markers so that merchant caravans could travel safely, even in rain. In that solemn setting, Takebayashi Noritsugu, the lord of Omi, spoke slowly. Our lands contain many marshes. We must dig canals to the Katata River and reinforce embankments against floods. Nobunaga nodded and stressed that every soldier working on the project would receive extra rice and rights to mine iron at Mount Hira, essential material for forging swords and spears. This fairness softened Noritsugu's resolve, and he pledged 100 samurai and local labourers to the effort. Nearby, under a tree by the stream, Nagachika Oda's students, Nobunaga's younger brother's disciples, had gathered for meditation training under the Zen master Enko. Seated cross-legged on floral mats, they breathed in time with the trickling water. Among them, the young samurai Yamanaka Shikanosuke felt the warmth of each breath wash away his battlefield anxieties. It was the lesson Nobunaga prized above all: cultivate the mind and sharpen the intellect, lest one be carried away by the delusion of power. At noon, Nobunaga and his commanders strolled along the wooden gallery beneath the eaves, passing a plum grove in full bloom. Sakuma Nobumori, the veteran general, sighed. "I fought under your father's banner and witnessed glorious victories. Now, as I admire these blossoms, I wonder, once the land is unified, will samurai preserve this haven of peace or turn it into a stage for power's display?" Nobunaga paused, gazing into the canopy. "General Sakuma, power only holds meaning when used to protect natural beauty and the people's hopes. Today's plum blossoms remind us that life is brief. Cherish it before the storm arrives." That evening, a temporary outdoor stage hosted a No troupe performing Koko Genji. The tale of a gifted prince exiled in a cruel world moved the samurai audience. The mournful flute and soft drum awakened deep emotions in Nobunaga, who reflected that culture and martial prowess must go hand in hand. Samurai should know both the art of battle and the subtleties of human feeling. When night fell and torches lit the walls, Nobunaga returned to his study, where Liu Xuandei's 5 precepts lay waiting. He set an oil lamp by the scroll and murmured the opening lines. "A ruler without justice cannot guard. A general without justice cannot prevail." The call to righteousness and discipline made him nod. Only by upholding integrity can a samurai deserve his sword, not merely rely on the might of his weapon. A soft knock interrupted him. A young lady in court attire entered with a letter from Ekizen, reporting a clash between 2 land-grabbing bands. Nobunaga frowned, dipped his brush, and penned his reply. Dispatch the command to eliminate both gangs, protect the villagers, and submit a detailed account of every step. It was proof of his thoroughness, never allowing power to slack, yet never spreading needless fear. Finally, before sending out his troops, he decreed a Suigyokai festival on Lake Biwa's shore, inviting samurai and commoners alike. Jingles of bells and cheerful shouts resounded as 5-coloured banners fluttered in the night. Beneath the bright moon, they paddled small boats and beat drums to ward off misfortune, praying for abundant harvests and lasting peace. In that moment, Nobunaga saw simple yet sacred joy. Samurai are not just warriors, but bearers of hope for all. And in the deep moonlight, with the last lamp flickering out, Nobunaga's silhouette lingered on the balcony, listening to the lake's gentle waves. He whispered to himself, "The country's future holds many trials, but with an indomitable spirit and an open heart, the 16th century samurai will continue their triumphant song, wielding both steel and virtue." The morning mist still clung to the blades of grass as Oda's cavalry quietly withdrew to Inabayama after the festival on Lake Biwa. Nobunaga, seated on a wooden dais in a silent chamber, gazed at a folding screen depicting the wind and cloud battle, where 9 hooves thundered up stone steps. He keenly felt the precarious balance between rising power and lurking peril. News arrived that Mori Yoshinari, one of the former Azai generals, refused to submit and had allied with the Shibata and Uesugi clans. Nobunaga knew that if he did not suppress this at once, Ekizen and northern Hokuriku would become hotbeds of resistance, prolonging an endless war. He immediately formed an alliance of convenience with Tokugawa Ieyasu, permitting Mikawa troops to secure key passes, while dispatching his rising lieutenant Hashiba Hideyoshi to subdue Mori. Throughout the march to Echizen, Hideyoshi drilled his forces in strict discipline. Slay the enemy, but protect the people. pillage only to dismantle resistance, not to slaughter innocents. This ethos spread among the soldiers, making them not just conquerors but builders, restoring infrastructure after each battle. Upon reaching Kitanosho Castle, Mori's seat of power, Hideyoshi constructed a forward camp, deployed river gunboats and built earthen ramps to intimidate the defenders until Mori surrendered unconditionally. Returning to Azuchi, Hideyoshi reported in full, and Nobunaga hosted a grand feast in the pleasure garden by the water. Lantern-lit barges drifted across the lake. Bugaku dancers performed amid showers of blossoms, and samurai laughter filled the night camp. This celebration was as much a declaration. Oda had completed his first step toward unifying the realm. Yet greater power bred deeper suspicion. On a midsummer Saturday night, when the full moon shone upon Azuchi Castle, a band of samurai, loyal to Akechi Mitsuhide, whom Nobunaga had once promoted and trusted, quietly drew their swords. Rumour held that Mitsuhide resented being passed over for high rank, and under pressure from retainers with Asai ties, he plotted betrayal. Mitsuhide's forces slipped along a hidden pine-lined trail into the inner compound where Nobunaga slept after the banquet. Sounding the alarm bell, Oda sprang up with a few trusted generals, but at the Kyoku Inn gate of Honoji, his guards had vanished, replaced by Akechi cavalry. In the smoky darkness, blades flashed, cleaving through the ancient bamboo groves. Realizing resistance was futile, Nobunaga followed samurai ritual. He ordered his loyal retainer, Seisho, and knight Nishina Morinobu to set fire to the armory, then used his wakizashi to take his own life, preserving a shred of warrior honor. Flames consumed the banquet hall, smoke mingling with leftover gunpowder, casting Oda's silhouette against stone walls like a fleeting monument before collapse. At dawn, word of Oda Nobunaga's death struck the provinces of Owari, Mino-Omi like thunder. Samurai who had sworn fealty fell silent. Many refused to believe their lord was gone. Rebels hastily withdrew to attack other strongholds, but Hideyoshi, bearing news of the tragedy, seized the opportunity to proclaim himself lord. Hideyoshi, with deft strategy, treated the Akechi clan leniently. No brutal purges, but swiftly isolated Mitsuhide. In the Battle of Yamazaki, just 6 days after Honoji, Mitsuhide was destroyed. Hideyoshi then ordered a solemn retrieval of Nobunaga's remains, recovered the shogunal seal, granted titles to the family, and carried on the unification campaign under the banner of upholding Oda's legacy. From the Honoji incident, the new generation of samurai learned that true power rests not only on wisdom and arms, but on loyalty and political savvy. They remembered Oda's example, from brilliant victories to tragic end, as a lesson in impermanence and the uncertainties of a warrior's life. The morning mist still clung to the grass as Oda's cavalry quietly withdrew to Inabayama after the Lake Biwa festival. Nobunaga, seated on a wooden dais in a hushed chamber, gazed at a folding screen painted with the wind and cloud battle, where 9 horses thunder up stone steps. He felt acutely the precarious balance between flourishing power and lurking danger. Heard news that Mori Yoshinari, one of the former Asai generals, refused to submit and had allied with the Shibata and Uesugi clans. Nobunaga knew that unless he crushed them swiftly, Ekizen and northern Hokuriku would become hotbeds of resistance and drag the war on indefinitely. He immediately forged a temporary alliance with Tokugawa Ieyasu, permitting Mikawa forces to secure the strategic passes, and dispatched his rising lieutenant, Hashiba Hideyoshi, to compel Mori's submission. Throughout the march to Echizen, Hideyoshi drilled his troops in strict discipline. Slay the enemy but protect the people. Pillage only to dismantle resistance, not to slaughter innocents. This ethos spread through the ranks, making them not just conquerors but builders, reconstructing roads and bridges after each battle. On reaching Kitanosho Castle, Mori's seat of power, Hideyoshi erected a forward camp, deployed river gunboats and built embankments to intimidate the defenders until Mori surrendered unconditionally. Back at Azuchi, Hideyoshi reported in full. Nobunaga then hosted a grand banquet in the water garden. Lantern-lit pleasure boats drifted across the lake. Bugaku dancers performed amid falling blossoms, and samurai laughter rang out across the camp. This was not merely celebration, but a proclamation. Oda had taken the first decisive step toward unifying the realm. Yet the greater the power, the deeper the suspicion. On a midsummer Saturday night, under the full moon's glow over Azuchi Castle, a band of samurai, loyal to Akechi Mitsuhide, whom Nobunaga had once promoted and trusted, silently drew their blades. Rumour held that Mitsuhide resented being passed over for a fitting title, and pressure from retainers with Asai ties drove him to betrayal. Mitsuhide's forces slipped along a hidden pine-lined trail into the inner compound where Nobunaga slept after the feast. He sounded the alarm bell, and Oda leapt up with a few trusted generals. But at the Kyoku Inn gate of Honoji, their guards had vanished, replaced by Akechi cavalry. In the smoky darkness, sword blades flashed as they severed ancient bamboo stalks. Realizing he could not hold out, Nobunaga followed samurai ritual. He ordered his loyal retainer, Seisho and knight Nishina Morinobu, to set fire to the armory, then used his wakizashi to end his own life, preserving a shred of warrior honor. Flames consumed the banquet hall. Smoke mingled with leftover gunpowder, casting Oda's silhouette on the stone walls like a fleeting monument before collapse. At dawn, word of Oda Nobunaga's death struck. The provinces of Owari, Mino-Omi, like thunder. Samurai who had sworn fealty fell silent. Many refused to believe their lord was gone. Rebels hastily withdrew to attack other strongholds, but Hideyoshi, bearing the tragic news, seized the opportunity to proclaim himself lord. Hideyoshi, with deft strategy, treated the Akechi clan leniently. No brutal purges, but swiftly isolated Mitsuhide. In the Battle of Yamazaki, just 6 days after Honoji, Mitsuhide was defeated. Hideyoshi then ordered a solemn retrieval of Nobunaga's remains, recovered the shogunal seal, granted titles to his family, and continued the unification campaign under the banner of upholding Oda's legacy. From the Honoji incident, the new generation of samurai learned that true power rests not only on wisdom and arms, but on loyalty and political skill. They remembered Oda's example from dazzling victories to tragic end as a lesson in impermanence and the uncertainties of a warrior's life. The morning mist still clung to the wildflowers lining the dirt road as Tokugawa's cavalry passed through the hills of Mito at dawn. From the hilltop they looked down upon Ueno Castle, winding along the Tone River. Hearth smoke had cleared, revealing moss-covered roof tiles and pristine white walls, symbols of the new authority forged after Sekigahara. Tokugawa Ieyasu rode onto the earthen mound, his gaze quietly surveying the strategic stronghold he would make into the shogunate's centre. His officers whispered into the clear air, "We no longer wage war, yet we must never forget our duty to maintain order." This was the first mark of the Edo era, when samurai would no longer fight lone battles with sword in hand, but become military administrative officials, enforcing security and collecting taxes for the shogunate. Soon after relocating the capital to Edo in 1603, Ieyasu issued the Buke Shohato, regulations for all warriors, dictating dress codes, audience protocols, and banning overreach. From that moment on, samurai had to report to the central government before filing any lawsuit against commoners, were forbidden to launch private raids, and were bound by the Sankin Kotai system, alternating residence between their domains and Edo to control their movements and tighten ties with the shogun. Along the Tokaido Road, lines of samurai in white undergarments, swords at their hips, paraded through village after village before gathering in Edo for their audiences. Each clan had to station personnel and even bring their families to live in designated quarters. Though costly, this policy glued samurai to the central system, preventing them from mustering rebellion and also stimulating trade and cultural exchange throughout the land. Within the castle compound, those who once made their names on the shores of Lake Biwa now sat at desks, learning to draw up contracts for the populace, creating the registers that recorded each peasant's name, the size of their fields and the taxes owed. They studied Confucian calligraphy to compose enduring edicts. Their swords remained sheathed at their sides, but their duties had shifted to safeguarding the courts, enforcing laws, and adjudicating local disputes. To reinforce the warrior spirit in peacetime, the shogunate commissioned the Kanai Shoka Keizu, a genealogy of samurai families, chronicling ancestral deeds and Bushido traditions. Samurai everywhere read it before ceremonies, reminding themselves that even without bloodshed, their honour depended on loyalty, integrity, and readiness to sacrifice. The tea ceremony, zen, and no theatre continued to flourish. In Edo Castle's imperial gardens, Tokugawa Yoshimune, the 8th generation after Ieyasu, built tea huts and invited a descendant of Sen no Rikyu to teach. Thus, the ritual of tea drinking was standardized into Tokcha, the samurai's formal tea contest, where social grace and humility were measured alongside brewing skill. Edo's calm also saw an artistic and scholarly boom. Basho's haiku spread nationwide, ukiyo-e woodblock prints depicted everyday life, and Kano Yoshinobu paintings adorned samurai estates. They recognized that art not only beautified living spaces, but soothed the mind, balancing inner tranquility with official responsibilities. Although the shogunate strictly prohibited private arms trade, many samurai maintained small forges in their compounds, producing exquisite mizume, or hitatsura, blades. Though not intended for battle, these katana became heirlooms, symbols of lineage and fidelity passed down through generations. Beyond the walls, villagers cultivated rice in peace. Canal and dam systems expanded, and merchant boats berthed along the Sumida docks carrying rice and goods to the capital. Samurai enforced a total ban on peasant uprisings, using the reward for informers system to encourage reports of rebellion plots, helping the shogunate sustain social stability through nearly 3 centuries of peace. Amid all this, every samurai understood that his role had changed, from battlefield hero to arbiter of justice, from strategist on the field to court official in the halls. The sword still gleamed at his side, but now it sounded the note of law and dignity rather than the clash of steel. At day's end, as the sun dipped behind the hills and Osaka's bougainvillea-fringed encampments fell quiet, samurai returned to their quarters. There, under the old pine, they sat with their Zen masters, meditating on life's impermanence, reminded that, however grand their fame and power, they must be ready to let it go when history calls them onward. The crescent moon's light softly illuminated the roof tiles of Edo Castle, as lines of samurai returned home after a long day serving the shogunate. Along the stone-paved path beside the moat, they paused at a small tea house by the city walls, where the proprietor, a venerable monk versed in Zen, had prepared fragrant cups of green tea. The steam rising from the cups, mingled with the faint scent of incense, seemed to still the warrior's soul, allowing inner storms to give way to peace. In the years since, samurai no longer fought on battlefields. Instead, their days passed in quiet service with ledgers and ceremonial protocols. They drafted petitions, delivered speeches before the civil administration office, coordinated the distribution of rice, and oversaw the construction of embankments. The sound of chisels and the rhythm of ploughs in the fields below the castle echoed like the drums of war, transformed into the cadence of a bountiful harvest. During meetings, samurai sometimes debated fiercely over tax reforms or plans for the samurai's paradise, land grants for retired warriors. They discussed opening schools to teach Chinese characters and nom script to the next generation, inviting scholars to lecture on the 3 character classic and the 4 books, so that their heirs might master the brush as well as understand the virtues behind the sword. In the afternoon, a group of young samurai gathered at the newly built dojo, where an elder master taught the seated Aikiken form, combining sword techniques with mental discipline. The sound of footsteps, the creak of joints, and sunlight filtering through wooden louvers created a solemn yet warm atmosphere. They believed that even without wielding a katana, maintaining their techniques and training their bodies kept their spirits supple and their minds sharp. As night deepened, the red lantern glow fell on samurai women, the daughters and wives of warriors, busily repairing light armour or polishing treasured blades. In gentle conversation, they reminded one another of Bushido's spirit. Though the sword rests, the samurai's honour must always come first. Sometimes worry clouded youthful eyes, but they also shone with pride, recalling their fathers' and husbands' deeds. Before Sensoji Temple, retired samurai gathered for a peace prayer ceremony for the villages, offering incense, flowers, and wooden ima plaques inscribed with prayers. Grant the people abundance, and grant the warriors steadfast resolve to keep the peace. The temple bell echoed, its reverberations among the rustling bamboo lending the moment a profound sanctity. They stood in silence, eyes closed, listening to the recitation of sutras, a single, deep note amid the splendour of everyday life. A samurai's journey is now measured by decrees ensuring communal tranquility and by moments of inward reflection, rather than by earth-shaking battles. The gleaming sword is no longer Hawot, sole emblem of status. It is joined by the pink ledger recording one's lineage, or the wooden box holding the brush that notes ancestral deeds. Yet when an alarm bell sounds at night, even if only a security drill, they still don their armour and draw their swords, hearts pounding in time with the drums, affirming that the warrior spirit remains undimmed. In the hushed darkness, as weary feet seek rest, the samurai smile inwardly and remind themselves, our path was never easy, but it is in these silent steps that we build a firm foundation for peace. From that quiet resolve, they straighten their uniforms, arrange their papers, and gaze toward the distant horizon, where tomorrow's dawn will again open new hopes for the Eastern warrior class. A hazy sea of clouds stretched across the horizon as columns of samurai from the domains of Sumoto, Matsue, and Tosa quietly advanced into the Kishu Valley, winding between bamboo groves along the Ki River. Gone were the clattering horse hooves, replaced by the soft roll of cargo wheels and the gentle footsteps of attendants carrying official documents, heralding an age entirely different from the turbulent centuries before. By the mid-18th century, as Tokugawa internal governance gradually stabilised, samurai faced a paradox. Though they still held ranks and warrior titles, most no longer fought on battlefields, but became civil servants collecting taxes, supervising farmers, and managing population registers. Those duties demanded administrative knowledge far more than bowmanship or swordsmanship. In the pale midday light, they gathered in a wooden meeting hall lined with washi paper, debating how to adjust the first-class land tax, Ichibu Zeikin, to prevent peasant uprisings while ensuring adequate revenue for the shogunate. In Wakayama, Deputy Lord Honda Masakatsu removed his old ceremonial garb and sat before a land survey map, recording paddy acreage in ink. He sighed when he discovered that samurai stipends consumed 70% of the domain's income, while rice prices had fallen due to illicit liquor trade by merchants from Omi. The stark figures on the white paper forced the young lord to propose that lower-ranked samurai take up paid posts teaching martial arts or sell family swords to cover living expenses. In Edo's Bugyosho office, Magistrate Kano Hideyuki, a former warrior at Sekigahara, confronted mounting debts among many samurai. They borrowed from Omi merchant houses to purchase court gifts, took rice loans from villagers for festival offerings, then relied on moneylenders like Nebo to roll over their debts. The heavy gavel strikes on his desk felt like a sword, piercing his warrior pride each time he decided to lower interest rates or postpone tax collection. Amidst the torrents of data and decrees, samurai still sought to preserve their spirit. The Higashi Mairi festival at Nikko Shrine continued to draw thousands of warriors and their families to offer incense, pray for favourable feng shui, and drink sweet frozen sake from the Aizu region. The beat of the Yukizome drum shattered tension and rekindled faith that however dire the circumstances, they remained warriors protected by the kami of earth and land. Beyond economic burdens, samurai also faced the rise of the Chonin merchant class in Osaka, Edo, and Nagasaki. Confucian envoys like Yongming had warned merchants are fickle, caring only for profit. Yet in practice, mid-level traders such as the Suminoya and Kitamura families amassed fortunes rivaling minor daimyo, purchasing land mortgaged by samurai, opening nishijin and Yamato fabric shops, and contracting to supply matchlock firearms. This embrace of the samurai relationship provoked both reliance and disdain from the lords. In this unsettled society, some samurai chose self-reliance, opening Yagyu Shinkai Ryu dojos in Osaka to teach swordsmanship to merchant descendants at high fees. Others turned to letters. Poet official Matsudaira Sadanobu, later Lord of Shirakawa, authored the Kansei reforms, redefining educational and disciplinary standards and emphasizing both the rights and duties of samurai under Confucian principles. Meanwhile, Rangaku, the study of Dutch science, permeated the open-minded samurai. They purchased microscopes, woodblock printers for medical texts, and read Kaitai Shinsho, translated from Dutch, learning human anatomy to improve army medicine. Chemistry experiments in a castle hallway laboratory signalled a new spirit. The warrior not only mastered martial arts, but also embraced scientific learning and international exchange. Yet the samurai's core nature could not be entirely shed. During formal tsujigiri fence matches, young warriors still practiced iai jutsu, drawing and striking in a single breath, to remind themselves that though they no longer fought wars, they remained ready to draw their swords to defend their honour. The gleam of lacquered armour in the late afternoon sun, and the short katana displayed on wooden racks, remained a sacred pride of the warrior lineage. In villages beyond the domain, samurai fathers taught sons light body techniques and horseback riding, while samurai mothers stitched warm linings into armour for winter. Children's laughter mingled with the clatter of wooden clogs on thatched floor homes, composing a brief melody of rare peace amid an era of transformation. At night, after balancing the ledgers and issuing tax postponement edicts to aid the people, the magistrate samurai sat before a cup of sencha, brewed from freshly picked Kyushu leaves, recalling his master's teaching. Water flows without turning back. The warrior must learn to adapt. He sipped the warm tea, letting its gentle bitterness fade, and quietly acknowledged that the samurai era was now defined not by the clash of swords, but by the stroke of the brush and the flexibility of the mind. A haze of clouds draped the horizon as columns of samurai from the domains of Sumoto, Matsue, and Tosa silently entered the Kishu Valley, winding between bamboo groves along the Ki River. Gone were the clattering hooves, replaced by the soft rolling of cargo wheels and the quiet footsteps of attendants bearing official scroll boxes, announcing an era wholly different from the stormy centuries before. By the mid-18th century, as Tokugawa rule stabilised at home, samurai faced a paradox. Though they retained ranks and warrior titles, most no longer fought on battlefields, but served as civil officials collecting taxes, overseeing agriculture, and managing the census. Those duties required administrative knowledge far more than archery or swordplay. In the pale noonday light, they convened in a wooden hall lined with washi paper, debating how to adjust the first-class land tax, Ichibu Zeikin, to prevent peasant revolt while ensuring sufficient shogunate revenues. At Wakayama headquarters, Deputy Lord Honda Masakatsu removed his ceremonial cloak and sat over a surveying map, recording acreage with India ink. He sighed upon learning that samurai stipends consumed 70% of domain income, while rice prices fell due to illicit sake trade by omi merchants. The stark black-on-white figures forced the young lord to propose that lower-ranked samurai teach martial arts or sell their swords to cover living costs. In Edo's Bugyosho magistrate's office, Kano Hideyuki, a former Sekigahara warrior, grappled with mounting debts among samurai. They borrowed from Miura merchants for court gifts, took rice loans from villagers for festivals, then relied on moneylender Nebo to roll over debts. Each gavel strike on his desk felt like a blade piercing his warrior pride whenever he reduced interest rates or postponed tax collection. Amid spreadsheets and edicts, samurai still sought to sustain their spirit. The Higashi Mairi pilgrimage at Nikko Shrine continued to draw thousands of warriors and families to offer incense, pray for favourable geomancy, and drink sweet frozen sake from Aizu. The beat of the Yukizome drum shattered tension and rekindled faith that however dire the moment, they remained warriors under the protection of the land's deities. Beyond economic burdens, samurai faced the rise of the Chonin merchant class in Osaka, Edo, and Nagasaki. Confucian envoys like Yongming had warned, merchants are fickle, caring only for profits. Yet omi houses like Suminoya and Ikitamura amassed wealth rivaling minor daimyo, buying land under samurai mortgages, opening nishijin and Yamata cloth shops, and contracting to supply matchlock rifles. This clinging to the samurai's heel relationship bred both dependence and contempt among the lords. In this turbulent society, some samurai chose self-reliance. They opened Yagyu Shinkaj Ryu dojos in Osaka, charging wealthy merchants high fees to teach swordsmanship. Others turned to letters. Poet official Matsudaira Sadanobu, later Lord of Shirakawa, authored the Kansi Reforms, redefining educational standards and discipline, emphasizing samurai rights and duties under Confucian doctrine. Simultaneously, Rangaku, the study of Dutch learning, permeated open-minded samurai. They purchased microscopes and woodblock printers for medical texts, studied the Kaitai Shinsho Anatomy Manual, translated from Dutch, and conducted chemical experiments in castle laboratories. This signalled a new spirit. The warrior not only mastered sword arts, but also embraced scientific inquiry and global exchange. Yet the samurai core could not be wholly shed. During formal tsujigiri fencing contests, young warriors still practiced iai jutsu, drawing and striking in a single breath, to remind themselves that though they no longer fought wars, they remained ready to draw their swords to defend their honour. The gleam of lacquered armour at sunset and the short katana displayed on wooden racks remained a sacred symbol of the warrior lineage. In villages beyond the domain, samurai fathers taught sons light body techniques and horsemanship, while samurai mothers stitched warm linings into winter armour. Children's laughter mixed with the clatter of wooden clogs on thatched floors, a brief melody of rare peace amid an era of transformation. At night, after balancing ledgers and issuing tax postponement edicts to aid the people, samurai magistrates sat before cups of sencha, brewed from fresh Kyushu leaves, recalling their master's teaching. Water flows without turning back. The warrior must learn to adapt. They sipped the warm tea, letting its subtle bitterness fade, and quietly recognised that the samurai age was now defined not by the clash of swords, but by the stroke of the brush and the flexibility of the mind. A strange plume of smoke drifted across Nagasaki's harbour as twilight deepened before Key Castle's cherry tree canopy. Alarm bells rang throughout Edo, summoning local samurai to the records hall, where they usually discussed tax rolls, to hear news from the Dutch crew. America demands trade. Since July of K6, 1853, when President Perry's 4 American warships entered Edo Bay, Japanese warriors' worldviews spun. A sword hung at the hip no longer tamed international storms. Instead, the shogunate issued successive emergency edicts. forbid civilians from disclosing news, summon prominent daimyo to Edoyu to report. Middle-aged samurai, once accustomed to sakoku isolation, now fumbled through unprecedented diplomatic darkness. By lamplight in a council chamber, samurai led by Satsuma's lord Shimazu Nobuhisa debated fiercely. One faction urged Bakuhan Tai-o, shogunate feudal alliance, to preserve the system, while Sono Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, demanded driving out the foreigners. Their faces were tense, for today's decision would determine the fates and fortunes of tens of thousands of warriors. Meanwhile, Rangaku scholars like Omura Masujiro secretly held classes on Western naval warfare and cannon. They borrowed texts from Holland and America, enlisted Nagasaki smiths to forge new style rifles. Each morning, young samurai drilled loading behind the barrel, adjusting elevation, and firing at iron targets. Their katana still gleamed at their hips, but guns were hailed as the weapons of the coming age. At the same time, roving ronin began raiding coastal roads for the country, sabotaging trade. Villagers panicked, crime soared. Local samurai split forces, half escorting grain shipments, half hunting criminals. On night marches through wind and rain, they clashed with the notorious Tsukuda no Shogun bandits, swords flashing coldly in storm. The acrid smell of gunpowder and sweat on their brows weighed heavily on each warrior's heart. Simultaneously, Kokugaku, national learning surged, calling samurai to recall imperial traditions and native culture. Elder samurai gathered at Kashima Shrine to read the Shinyo, Hikyoku, and Kojiki, affirming that true authority lay with the emperor. They sent petitions urging the shogunate to suspend all foreign treaties and defend the Son of Heaven's sovereignty. The Sono Joyi movement thus gained unstoppable momentum. Under internal and external pressure, the shogunate reluctantly expanded the Ansei treaties, 1854-58, ceding ports at Hakodate, Niigata, and Osaka. Loyal samurai wept as foreign flags fluttered over piers, daimyo banners declaring Yokohama open for Western merchants. A political storm descended, driving many warriors to strike, refusing to enforce treasonous diplomatic edicts. Facing collapse, Choshu's Mori Motonori and Satsuma's Shimazu secretly revised military strategy, mobilized small naval forces, and adopted British-style cannon. They built high-gun batteries along the inland sea coast, creating a defensive belt alongside cavalry. Japan's infantry, long unused to large-scale war, heard cannon roar through pine forests for the first time, hearts pounding as they had when first facing the Mongols. But the fiercest battles played out off the battlefield. In Nagato Castle's painting hall, senior samurai held multi-day Aigyo-go matches to debate national defense strategies. Each move on the board mirrored troop maneuvers at the frontier. Stones served both as symbols and lessons in patience and linked tactics. Flickering candlelight, they looked into one another's eyes, striving to devise ways to defend the realm without sacrificing honour. When the shogunate was forced to convene the Kyoto Policy Enforcement Council, 1862, samurai and scholars flocked there, bearing contracts of non-acceptance to protest or urgent petitions to demand punishment for treaty signatories. Their brushes flew stronger than their swords, for now the written word decided the nation's fate. On the eve of that historic decision, young samurai gathered by the Kamo River. A campfire flickered against their ancient blades as they recited the Shinden poem. Courage walks hand in hand with righteousness. Through straw-burning smoke, their unified cry rang out, "Better to die than to lose our country." That shout split the night, affirming a warrior spirit that transcended the shifting tides of history. The haze of battle smoke from the Boshin War spread across the land of the cherry blossoms as ancient samurai blades clashed again in Kyoto's open markets. After the Sono Joy faction briefly triumphed and Emperor Meiji was restored, The new government summoned veteran warrior contingents, Shonai, Aizu, Satsuma, Choshu, to clash in the old capital, igniting a fierce civil war. In the crisp autumn air, Aizu cavalry, under the white and red Matsudaira banner, crossed Shijo Bridge, their Byakutai flags of 20-year-old recruits fluttering. They advanced up Tsuruga Hill to defend the Yorokan residence, where commanders and refugees sheltered. The thunder of newly familiar rifles shattered the dawn. Steel bullets pierced light armor, jolting the samurai awake. No longer only spear and sword, but firearms now reshaped warfare's face. Meanwhile, Saigo Takamori's Satsuma forces, veterans of the shogunate campaigns in Kagoshima, emplaced field artillery on Utsunomiya Hill to bombard the Shiroyama fortress. In that final decisive engagement, Aizu survivors charged with cold blades and oil-soaked straw hats like a fierce waterfall, yet ultimately were overwhelmed. Young heroes fell, kneeling by their torn banners, chanting sutras, convinced that death was a samurai's last glory. In Osaka, once a bustling marketplace now became a makeshift barracks where fleeing shogunate remnants scurried, seeking honourable refuge. At night, one might glimpse a lone commander in western suit, sword still at his hip, an image both antiquated and out of place in the new world. They tipped their hats to the first departing steam train, carrying away the Meiji Charter Oath and the Heitere Edict, banning samurai from wearing swords in public. That decree exploded like thunder. Swords were surrendered, samurai splendour quietly extinguished. Figures once heroic in Aizu's, Buraku's, or Hakodate's flames now returned arms to government officials and exchanged samurai garb for black coats and white cravats. Some grimaced, others sighed softly, as if mourning an entire martial life now consigned to history. Before long, in the winter of Meiji II, 1869, the Boshin rebellion ended with Shonai's defeat at Hakodate and the suppression of its remnants at Goryokaku. Edo's old gates opened to a new era, railways crisscrossing the fields, a modern navy based at Yokosuka, and the first samurai bureaucrats wielding Western rifles. In the cold winter air at Yokohama Harbour, a group of former warriors formed the Veterans Association, discussing teaching martial arts, opening dojo, or writing memoirs to preserve Bushido. They understood that while the sword might be laid aside, the spirit of loyalty, justice, and courage must be passed to the next generation. On the first steam train, amid the whistle's piercing cry, a former noble samurai, now clad in a long coat, clutched his last wakizashi, gazed out to sea, and whispered, "Though the road ahead brims with technology and invention, the warrior class will never lose its identity. Brave as samurai, pure as the tea-way, and humble as the Zen monk." Dawn light filtered through the Meiji-style patterned glass window, bathing the polished wooden desks and chairs of the Tokyo Archives operations room in gold. On the desk lay a new leather notebook, still redolent of Latin character print ink, remnants of the recently enacted peerage law. Outside the window, Western soldiers in crisp navy uniforms drilled with their percussion-lock rifles. They no longer wore samurai armour or carried wakizashi. Instead, each sported a small ceremonial rapier, reminding all that, no matter how modern, the samurai's honour endures. In the hallway of the Ministry of Administration, former warriors, now mid-level officials, debated the drafting of the Citizens' Rights Act, Chomin Kisei, defining civilian rights and conscription conditions. They understood that subjecting the populace to military discipline would erase class discrimination and forge a powerful national defence force. Yet in the eyes of many battle-hardened generals lingered this concern. Will commoners still uphold the samurai spirit once a rifle is placed in their hands? Next door, the Career Research Committee, led by Professor Miura Masayoshi, pored over the newly translated Chronicles of Border Affairs. They prepared a strategic report on diplomatic relations to avoid repeating the Sakoku era's mistakes. A former samurai, gently tapped his brush on the desk edge, and declared, "As we build collective strength, we must preserve loyalty and honour treaties." At Yokohama port, the steam train carrying inspection commissioners roared like war horses of old. On deck, an elderly samurai noble, now in western overcoat, clutched his last wakizashi and gazed down the rails toward the horizon. In his youth, he drilled sword forms beneath a willow. Now he studied nautical charts to guard the coastline. He quietly reflected, "Though the sword is sheathed, strategic intellect now decides the nation's fate." In the heart of a transforming capital, streets brimmed with Japanese, British, French and American flags before modern trading firms, banks and printing presses. In a gaslit cafe, young samurai, now Meiji newspaper reporters, bowed respectfully to Western colleagues before typing Romaji dispatches on naval firepower for readers around the globe. The samurai flame did not dim amid bitter brews and cigar smoke. Rather, it blazed through every dispatch on loyalty, warrior spirit, and self-reliance. Outside the newly established National Police Martial Arts School, lines of recruits, many the children of samurai and ronin, stood at attention. They drilled loading and disassembling handguns and practiced jujutsu techniques adapted for law enforcement. Each knee lock and arm throw bore the imprint of ancient sword arts. An instructor, once a Taisen warrior, declared, "To preserve peace, one must first secure oneself." As evening fell, in a narrow alley by the Nihonbashi Canal, a group of retired samurai, wearing kimono beneath European vests and wool bowler hats, gathered around a portable tea table. They sipped warm sake, rested hands on polished wakizashi, and read aloud from the newly published Bushido manifesto, the timeless oath of loyalty, integrity, and self-sacrifice for the nation. A breeze carried the faint scent of still warm oil lamps, beckoning the younger generation to carry the samurai torch through the storm of modernity. Thus, in an era when feudal foundations had collapsed, the samurai class entered a new chapter, not on blood-soaked battlefields, but in the arenas of policy, knowledge, and national aspiration. And though their swords lay carefully stored, their warrior hearts still beat fiercely, ready to defend a Japan that was both traditional and new. Pale dawn mist lingered over Inokashira Pond as Tokyo streets began to glow with nightlights. In the large conference room of the newly established Ministry of War, former samurai, now generals of the Imperial Army, met to plan the first combined exercises modelled on Western tactics. Though they bore the rank insignia of general, in their hearts still echoed the old teachings. Be brave yet clear-headed, disciplined yet adaptable. The plan lay spread across the table on sheets of kaisho-style Latin characters, interspersed with bold kanji annotations, a fusion of two cultures. Lieutenant General Nogi Marasuke, celebrated for his victory at Qingdao, proposed dividing the force into three arms: artillery, infantry, and the 1st Motorcycle Cavalry. He emphasised that, though a ceremonial wakizashi still hung at the hip, real combat now relied on gun barrels and rubber-tired tanks, demanding samurai broaden their strategic vision. Between strategic debates, technical advisors displayed electromagnets and Royal Navy ship schematics to illustrate the advantages of steam engines and wireless communication. Under the warm glow of oil lamps, the elder samurai quietly nodded. Though iron horses replace living steeds, Bushido still requires us to steel our wills and stand united. From the adjacent hall came the clear notes of the shinobue flute, where a troupe of samurai in Western dress donned kimono for a modern bugaku performance, marking the exercise's opening. Their dance, blending Iai Ken's swift sword draws with Western martial band movements, wowed foreign dignitaries, both classical and free-spirited. On the reviewing stand, samurai commanders stood at attention, pride shining in their eyes. The warrior culture thrived even as the nation transformed. Tomorrow morning, crowds would flock the new railway from Ueno to Yokohama. Among them, former samurai turned military instructors stood in the coaches, explaining Bushido's history to Japanese and foreign officers alike. They sketched the Genpei War's battle lines on paper and likened the steel rails to defensive ramparts. An army must be as steadfast as a rocky cliff, yet as flexible as a spear in the wind. At the Imperial Military Academy on Ichigaya Hill, the first graduates of the Western Strategy course were commissioned as second lieutenants, a rank unknown under the Tokugawa. Beside their hands lay a small gold-plated ceremonial katana, symbolizing indomitable spirit, displayed alongside the new Arisaka rifle on wooden racks. These paired weapons testified to a historical turning point, honoring the past while advancing into the future. In Yanaka village at Mount Fuji's foothills, Zen masters who once guided samurai minds now offered free Zen for soldiers classes. Former warriors sat cross-legged beneath ancient pines, chanting the Impermanence Sutra and practicing walking meditation. They cultivated deep breaths, letting go of political cares to reclaim inner calm, so that their warrior hearts remained unshaken by ambition. At dusk, a women of Bushido contingent gathered at Tokyo Police Headquarters, daughters of samurai officials and daughters-in-law of retired warriors, carrying short swords and revolvers to their public self-defense training. In the new national security context, these female samurai upheld family honor and became pillars of social safety, proof that equality and collective strength endures. On Japan's first Shinkansen, from Yokohama to Nagoya, passengers were served matcha in stainless cups alongside traditional lotus seed confections. Among the sleek cars, retired samurai in Western suits, ceremonial swords at their hips, quietly recounted memories of their reluctant disarmament, now proud of how their leadership and character had transitioned into politics, education, and public service. As sunset bathed Ginza Avenue, neon signs in English and Japanese advertised the Imperial Military Academy and the first International Bushido Forum. Across izakaya taverns, former samurai raised sake cups with comrades, eyes alight with the aspiration for a strong Japan, rooted in tradition, yet fully modern. When the taiko drums sounded at Shimbashi Station and the last train of the day departed, it carried warrior souls still eager to explore a new way of conflict, where swords have given way to cannon, and samurai honor now rests on citizenship and service to the nation. Thus, Chapter 6, Part 2 closes in this space of convergence. The samurai have not lost their warrior essence, but have transformed into the builders and guardians of a modern state. In the pale dawn mist, rows of flags fluttered atop the newly established civil military units on Ueno Hill. The officers, most of whom had once been samurai, stood at attention for the morning salute, hands raised to the brims of their Western-style kepi caps, eyes fixed on the emperor's new national flag. The bugle calls rang out, replacing ancient war drums, reminding them of their mission to safeguard sovereignty and national unity. After the ceremony, Lieutenant General Oyama Iwayo, renowned for commanding naval forces in the Sino-Japanese War, led an inspection tour to the Provincial Administrative Training School in Kangata. There, hundreds of young men from countryside and city studied law, foreign languages, and modern strategy. He declared, "In the past we cut new paths with steel. Today knowledge and adaptability are our strongest weapons." His words rang like a clarion call. The new generation of samurai must master both intellect and action. In the Bushido History Research Room, scholars and former warriors completed the Bushido Origins Compendium, an anthology tracing samurai ethics from the Genpei conflict to the Meiji era. They analysed each tumultuous phase, from the early saburai to strategic scholars, drawing lessons for young minds. Beneath the warm gaslight, each page, imbued with dedication, gathered the spirit of a class that had weathered a century of upheaval. In modern Tokyo's heart, the monthly sword salute ceremony continued at Yasukuni Shrine. Though katana were seldom drawn, the solemn sword-raising ritual before the war memorial still drew veterans and soldiers alike, an act affirming that indomitable courage and loyalty would never fade. Swords swished in silver arcs before candlelight, creating a moment both ancient and deeply poignant. In suburban Yanaka, the Shinsengumi Kobo Dojo opened, founded by descendants of the original Shinsengumi. There, students trained in variant jujutsu, iaido swordsmanship, and collective command skills. Though no longer bound for battle, lessons in military discipline and self-sacrifice were taught rigorously, so that every citizen might defend themselves and bolster the nation's strength if called upon. On Meiji's first National Foundation Day, the Imperial Band paraded down Chiyoda Avenue. Former samurai, some of whom had fought under multiple regimes, felt a surge of pride. They no longer secured victories over foreign invaders by steel alone, but through a resolute national spirit and modern legal order. Drumbeats, brass fanfares, and neat ranks of troops reflected the nation's transformation. As the sun sank behind Mount Fuji, in the Foreign Ministry's offices, a group of new samurai, returning from study in Europe, presented their report on the Modern Ammunition Treaty. They displayed maps, statistical charts, and harbour development plans proving that samurai, though still wearing swords, could now serve as diplomats, merchants, and industrial experts. And under Tokyo's first electric streetlights, figures in long western coats and bowler hats glided along the sidewalks. This was the last generation of samurai, living between two worlds, preserving tradition while embracing modernity. The gleam of wakizashi peeking from beneath a coat hem whispered of a heroic past, even as the army hailed victories with observation balloons and distant aircraft carriers. Thus, after defeat and transformation, the samurai did not vanish, but skillfully rebirthed themselves as guardians of the nation in a new form, wielding polymer-tipped rifle barrels, writing legal edicts with brush and ink, and carrying hearts still steeped in Bushido's loyalty, integrity, and courage. Their echoes endure, opening chapter 7 with the next pages of the samurai's path in the modern world. The dawnlight in Kyoto no longer wove faintly through yin-yang roof tiles, as in days of old, but reflected off the concrete walls of high-rises along the Kamo River. From the city centre came the hum of streetcars and car horns. The samurai class now donned elegant suits or crisp military uniforms, ready to step into a new chapter of history. In the National Cultural Hall, representatives from the Ministry of Education and Culture convened a symposium titled The Legacy of Bushido in the Age of Globalization. On stage, Professor Fujiwara Keiko, descended from the famed Yagyu lineage, and now teaching at the University of Tokyo, shared, "The spirit of Bushido is not merely about swords or military discipline, but forms the bedrock of civic ethics and how we treat one another in modern society." She presented evidence of the newly integrated samurai history curriculum in public schools. Around the conference table, veteran army officers, many of whom had served in the Pacific War, nodded in agreement. They understood that a nation's true strength lay not in the quantity of its arms, but in unity and indomitable will. Lieutenant General Tanaka Hiroshi, who once led a special operations brigade, recalled raising the rising sun flag before marches as the most solemn ritual before battle. He insisted these traditions must be preserved in every form, even if war was no longer the first choice. Immediately following the symposium, the samurai delegation, now members of the Bushido Cultural Association, toured the Iga History Museum Annex, which displayed hundreds of swords, spears, and armours from the Kamakura through Meiji eras. They queued before Minamoto no Yoshitsune's famed katana, lighting incense in respectful homage as if greeting an old comrade. In hushed tones they said, "Within each blade lies the sweat and blood of our ancestors. We carry that heritage in our hearts." That afternoon at Ueno Dojo, one of Japan's premier Iaido and Kendo centres, students of every age lined up in formation. Among them were young people of black, brown and white heritage from across Asia, Europe, America, and Africa, attentively following the lesson. Sensei Nakamura Takeshi, son of a Choshu samurai family, smiled and said, "Bushido now transcends borders. Humility, self-sacrifice, and steadfast resolve are the universal language of humanity." Weeks later at Yokohama Port, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Global Bushido Forum was ebullient. Delegates from over 30 nations, from Korea, China and Vietnam to France, the United States and Australia, gathered to sign a declaration of cooperation on studying and promoting the samurai spirit. That document emphasized human rights, team spirit, and personal discipline, the core values of both East and West. Amid bougainvillea, blossoms and multilingual banners, a group of honorary samurai in formal haori jackets ascended the stage and hoisted gleaming, gold-plated wakizashi aloft. The resounding beat of the taiko drums heralded the fusion of tradition and global integration. Under radiant lights, Japan's warrior class pledged not only to preserve their heritage, but also to help build a global community, where Bushido serves as a guiding principle in the military, government, and everyday life. The late afternoon glow lingered along the old path to Heian Shrine in Kyoto, where thousands of paper lanterns had been lit for the Yoi Matsuri, a festival honouring the spirit of the warrior. Youth in traditional haori released floating lanterns onto the Toba River. The water's shimmer in the soft breeze was like a song echoing from the past. Among this scene, members of the Bushido Cultural Association from Hokkaido to Okinawa quietly lit incense, paying homage to the ancestors who forged the essence of Bushido. In the days that followed, at Tokyo's National Defense Strategy Institute, Major General Shibata Yasuo, descended from the Hatakeyama clan, presented his report on applying Bushido principles to corporate leadership. He cited how the samurai values of Hansei, self-reflection, and Gambaru, persevering effort, had rescued his machinery company from the global financial crisis. CEOs from major automotive and tech groups nodded, agreeing that the samurai legacy helps Japan uphold its guiding motto, courageous yet humble. In Iga Village, once home to both ninja and samurai, a stealth arts class welcomed practitioners from around the globe. They practiced silent footwork, eye-based communication, and sharpened observational skills, heritage inseparable from the warrior arts. Sensei Ueno of the Yagyu Shinkage Ryu lineage said, "To defeat an enemy, sometimes the greatest victory is that they never detect your presence." On the Shinkansen bullet train, a group of international students in Kyoto University of Political Science uniforms eagerly discussed conflict resolution with Japanese classmates. They asked, "In a multipolar world, what value does Bushido still hold?" A Japanese alumnus replied, "When we engage in dialogue with respectful confidence, never arrogance, we embody the highest samurai virtue." Another winter arrived in Hokkaido, blanketing Mount Asahi in ice and snow. Members of the Takushoku Bushido community held a Reagan session meditation retreat. 5 days of silence, sitting meditation, and journaling. They believed only a tranquil mind can ensure actions remain rooted in loyalty and integrity, no matter how intense life's pressures. Near year's end, in Tokyo's Upper House chamber, the Prime Minister unveiled the new human security strategy, emphasizing individual will, determination, and community spirit, the very core values of Bushido. Former Ambassador Narita quoted Yamamoto Tsunetomo, "Knowing oneself does not make one strong. One must dare to pursue ideals." The chamber erupted in applause. Amid the flow of modernity and tradition, Meiji Yasukuni Shrine remained a place where samurai, soldiers, and civilians alike offered gratitude. When the final incense stick burned away, they stepped from the stone steps, eyes resolute toward the city's glowing streets, carrying this vow. No matter how we change, Bushido lives on, in our deeds and our hearts. On Ueno Park's wide lawn, the International Katana and Kendo display had just concluded. Practitioners from the US, France, India, Vietnam, and Japan stood in straight lines and bowed in unison, a ritual of solidarity transcending borders. In the crisp wind, the clash of blades rang out like a triumphant chorus. Bushido is not merely the spirit of Japanese warriors, but a heritage for all humanity. The late autumn dawn filtered through the bamboo grove before Katori Shrine, where the new generation of samurai gathered for the Divine March opening ceremony. Festival drums rolled across the precincts, heralding a sacred journey. The International Bushido Brigade, featuring representatives from Japan, Korea, Australia, and Brazil, would promenade along the ancient Ishimichi Road, linking historic samurai shrines. Before departure, each participant received a Kokoro no Michi armband embroidered with the characters for Heart's Journey, and a handwritten pledge to keep a steadfast mind, though storms assail us, though the ages change. They tied the armband on one arm, pressed their other hand to their chest, and bowed their heads in remembrance of warrior ancestors, from Minamoto no Yoritomo to Saigo Takamori, who wielded their blades in defense of justice and the people. The procession set off in silent reverence, following the moss-covered stone path past ancient pavilions and weathered torii gates. Japanese tabi steps blended with European leather shoes, Asian wooden clogs, and at times African rubber sandals, a harmonious chorus of cultures and indomitable spirit. At each waypoint, guides recounted legends of samurai garrisons, local battles, and tales of compassion when warriors rescued villagers from fire or plague. Midway, the group paused at Asama Shrine atop a hill, where samurai traditionally prayed for safety before campaigns. There, the French Bushido ambassador, a former officer of Napoleon's Imperial Guard, offered a ceremonial sword to the shrine, symbolizing international camaraderie. The samurai spirit has inspired thousands in Europe to embrace discipline and honor, he said. Today I present this blade in gratitude and to link our shared past with the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the procession reached the summit of Mito Hill, where a statue of an unnamed samurai was erected as a monument to the countless unnamed warriors who sacrificed all. Before the statue, everyone stood in silence for several minutes, then released sky lanterns, each bearing pledges to serve the community and preserve humanity's heritage. For a brief moment, the night sky blazed with their light, small flames uniting to form a great torch, guiding the spirit of Bushido ever onward. And when the group returned to the shrine's main altar, the haunting duet of flute and wind chimes reminded them that wherever they journey, whatever the eras reach, a samurai's heart remains rooted in its origins, steadfast in loyalty and unbroken in resolve. The golden dawn of Kanai 1634 streamed through the carved wooden frame painted with ocean waves in the seaside villa of Harima Province. There, 16-year-old Miyamoto Musashi was meticulously wiping down the rough-forged katana he would soon carry on his first journey toward becoming the unrivaled swordsman. His father gone, his mother living in seclusion inland, Musashi had learned early that walking alone was his closest companion, believing a warrior's footsteps must leave their mark on every corner of the land. With a small parcel of dried rice, a simple black samu robe, and a diminutive banner embroidered with the twin swords emblem given by his mounted teacher, Musashi left the village under a new moon sky. Along the rocky road, he lodged at Zen temples beside the highway, silently practicing Kinhin-han walking meditation to keep his mind calm amid storms, each breath echoing with rustling bamboo and sea breeze. Monks, noting his sharp gaze and steady-seated posture, whispered that here was the seed of a prodigy. Nearly 2 weeks later, rumours of the twin sword youth reached the Sakai dojo. There, famed master Yoshioka Denshichiro issued an open challenge to any self-styled expert. Unfazed, Musashi pressed his hands together at the gate and stepped under the dim lantern light. Dozens of students and spectators watched the duel between Musashi's raw katana and Denshichiro's long staff, bow. In a heartbeat, Musashi unleashed his dual-day stride technique, wielding both blades fluidly, evading the staff, then delivering a precise cut to his opponent's forearm that forced Denshichiro to yield. Cheers erupted, marking the birth of the two-sword samurai legend. Musashi's fame spread like sea wind, drawing seasoned fighters to test their mettle. In Ueda Castle's shadow, he encountered Sasaki Kojiro, renowned for his turning dragon style. They met unplanned on the Shozen riverbank, the clan barges drifting idly. Their lengthy duel unfolded beneath a purple dusk sky. Musashi used a wooden wakizashi, bokuto, he had carved himself from driftwood, short, nimble, in contrast to Kojiro's powerful long blade. His surprise crescent moon cut severed the wooden sword's hilt, sending Kojiro tumbling into the stream, proving the boundless creativity of a true warrior. From that day, Musashi inscribed 3 maxims in his life's journal. First, the steel katana. Second, the wooden wakizashi. Third, calmness before the foe. He continued his wanderings across Kanto, Kansai, and beyond, never lingering in one place. In each village, he both sparred and taught basic unarmed techniques before slipping away like a mist-shrouded phantom. The common folk called him the hunchbacked swordsman for his bent posture and uncanny stride, and tales of the two-sword samurai spread across 100 domains. Musashi's journey lay far ahead, from sword trials on Mount Kiyomizu to moonlit calligraphy and painting in Hitgo province, blending martial prowess with quiet self-cultivation. But in this moment, as he paused at the small shrine atop Shizuhata Pass, hands clasped on his katana's hilt and eyes fixed on the rosy horizon, he understood that every battle was a test of the self, and that the path of history's greatest samurai was only just beginning to reveal its hidden secrets. After winding along the Nakasendo Highway, Musashi arrived at Mount Hiei, where Enryakuji Temple lay hidden in the morning mist. There, Zen master Kobo Daishi was preparing a new sutra ceremony and invited Musashi to inaugurate the 3-character Zen sitting. At the steady rhythm of the temple bell, the young samurai seated himself in full lotus, focusing his mind on each breath. Amid the rustling bamboo, Musashi realized that martial skill was not merely weapon mastery, but the ability to master the mind, whether victorious in 100 battles or defeated. Leaving Hiei, Musashi passed through the merchant town of Otsu and paused at the Shijo dojo. There he unexpectedly met his old teacher, Master Terao Maganojo, who had taught him his first sword cuts. Maganojo's hair was now as white as clouds, yet his eyes still sparkled. With a smile he watched Musashi draw his self-made wooden wakizashi, and then said, "Your sword form is refined, but your inner sword form still shows rough edges." From that remark, Musashi understood he must practice daily meditation journaling, recording every emotion and every fencing lesson, before he could truly achieve one sword, no self. Onward to Busan province, Musashi sought out the Yagyu Shinkaji Ryu smith who had originally forged the legendary Muramasa blade. At a seaside fishing village, they discussed the interplay of ki and the blade, and methods for etching Hammond patterns into the steel so that each cut would be both powerful and balanced in yin and yang. That night, by the flickering firelight in a thatched tent, Musashi first sketched the 5 rings diagram, soon to become the core of the Go-Rin no-Sho, using eggshells and India ink. His next appointment lay along the Hosokawa Trail, where the Aizu lord invited him to serve as martial advisor to the court. At Tsuruga Castle, Musashi opened a school for elite troops and samurai, teaching the principle sword like water, flowing adaptability, and independent self-reliance, walking alone without loneliness. With each practice session, his students came to see that the sword itself was only a medium. True outcome depended on the wielder's spirit. On his return journey to Kyushu, Musashi made his final pilgrimage to Ganryu Island in 1612 to face his rival Sasaki Kojiro in a duel that has become legend, embodying the philosophy, win without arrogance, lose without discouragement. At Funaoka Wharf, he etched the characters for no sword into the sand before crushing his wooden wakizashi, symbolically ending his exclusive claim to martial prowess and entering the phase of the swordsman without sword, where true mastery transcends the weapon. When Musashi dipped his brush to write the opening lines of the Go-Rin no Sho in a humble wooden room in Yagyu village, he not only committed his two-sword art to paper, but distilled the heart of his teaching, tranquility within the storm, so that future generations would know that true martial art is the harmony of combat and contemplation, of the blade and the indomitable heart. Musashi departed Yagyu village, while the morning mist still clung to the bamboo tips. Seated in his simple palanquin, he watched the narrow hill path ahead, each step stirring the dry leaves into soft rustles. Pausing at his old training ground in Usuki, where he once practiced swordplay to the beat of war drums, Musashi cut a young bamboo branch, bent it gently, and began to whirl his wooden sword in a graceful dance, embodying his principle of wood and blade in harmony, weapon and nature as one. Passing through the bustling lands of Oita, he stopped at a roadside tea house where the proprietress once offered him a cooling cup of damp green tea. Today she raised her cup in greeting his return and asked, "Hunchbacked samurai, after countless victories, where does your heart now rest?" Musashi only smiled, his eyes thoughtful. "My heart's sword is not complete until it stands beneath Edo's vast skies." His carriage turned at the gate of the samurai barracks near Hakone Pass, where he first met Lord Hojo. Inside, the dojo physician was administering herbal tonics and sharing the famed doctrine of soft strength beneath calm exterior. Musashi sampled a few prescriptions, nodding in approval. Caring for the body, he agreed, is an essential part of a warrior's path. Crossing the Sagami Bay ferry, he glimpsed Mount Fuji's snow-capped summit in the distance, the very peak where he once sketched the 8 great seas in his battle diary. This time Musashi placed a hand on his wooden sword and whispered, "The eternal mountain teaches me. Though storms may sweep away all paths, my footing must remain steadfast." At last he arrived at Takeshiba, in Edo. A guard of samurai awaited him, bowing respectfully to the swordsman famed across the land. In the 3-room wooden house by the Sumida River, Musashi closed the shutters, lit incense before his half-finished Go-Rin no Sho, the flickering lamp casting his time-worn face in gentle light. Silence reigned, broken only by the soft sweep of a broom outside. Musashi sat down beside his leather-bound notebook, lifted his brush with hands trembling, but spirit firm. He would complete the final passages of the 5 rings before spring's end. With each stroke, he recorded not only the dual sword techniques, but the philosophy of victory in all things, where true mastery transcends every tangible limit. By that simple lamp, Musashi's shadow merged with the wooden wall, a lifetime's journey, from the twin-sword youth to the transcendent swordsman without sword, was drawing to its culmination. When his final brushstroke sealed the page, a night breeze whispered through the bamboo outside. As though applauding, Musashi had returned to himself, where blade and stillness unite, forging Bushido's immortal masterpiece. As the spring dawn painted the outskirts of Edo in rosy hues, Miyamoto Musashi had completed most of the Go-Rin no Sho manuscript. Yet he felt no rest, his spirit still hungering to hone the mind blade through fresh trials. One afternoon he received an invitation from Lord Hosokawa of Kumamoto, a patron who led a dojo blending soldiers and civil officials. The letter, penned in dark ink, read, "It would honour us to welcome the peerless swordsman, to exchange techniques and shared aspirations." Musashi's journey to Kumamoto was more than travel. It was a living verse on no self, demanding he renounce all pride. Riding slowly, He crossed golden pastures and mist-shrouded passes, pausing at Suizenji Pond, once famed for its bamboo grove retreat. There he practiced Kinhin-han, walking meditation, by the water's edge, listening to the drums of the heart. Martial skill did not rest solely on technique, but on the art of hearing one's foe through intuition. At the Suizenji-en dojo, Musashi was led into the Great Hall, where samurai of high rank from across the provinces had gathered. Their eyes regarded him with respect and curiosity. Was the swordsman without sword truly before them? Musashi bowed quietly, placed his Go-Rin no Sho upon a wooden stand, and gently expounded the 5 rings concept: earth, water, fire, wind, void, as the 5 spiritual states to balance before every stance. Over a week of discourse, Musashi and his fellow warriors explored multi-angled responses. Against a strong opponent, employ invisible technique. Against a slow adversary, unleash the no-self strike surprise. They practiced on the white gravel floor, executing a series of intellect-driven strikes, not only sword forms, but also using footstep sound and observant gaze as 3rd and 4th weapons. The atmosphere revealed that martial arts extends beyond muscle power into the realms of perception and will. When night fell, Musashi was invited to a tea banquet beside the cherry blossom garden. Amid the tea's warmth, he spoke with Lord Hosokawa on the philosophy of service above slaying, using wisdom and compassion to achieve one's aims rather than cutting down foes. The Lord nodded. "You have shown me that a great warrior protects not only the blade, but also human values." Departing Kumamoto, Musashi returned toward Edo with a firmer heart. En route, he visited a small publisher by the Sumida embankment, handing over the final Go-Rin no Sho manuscript for printing. The shopkeeper bowed in thanks, promising the work would inspire swordsmen and scholars for 1,000 generations. Musashi smiled and gently touched a single cherry blossom branch blooming at the shop's door, an emblem that the essence of martial spirit and indomitable will would forever bloom like spring flowers. Back at his riverside home, Musashi closed the door, placed his wooden wakizashi on its rack, and lit incense before his modest bookshelf. The lamp's flicker cast his shadow among volumes bearing his predecessors' names. He sat, watching his brush roll across paper streaked with blurred ink, symbolic of the warrior's creed: dare to write, dare to live, unafraid of smudged lines. And when the deep night shifted toward dawn, Musashi quietly drew his thin cover over himself, eyes closing in calm repose. The legendary swordsman's journey had spanned battlefields, dojo, and harsh trials. But true strength no longer lay in the cut of a blade or the point of a sword. It resided in a resolute heart that rises and passes on the Bushido legacy. In his dreams, he saw a sword-shaped cloud beckoning the warrior class to stride onward into the future. The blazing summer dawn of Kanbun 1, 1661, shone through the wooden lattice at Harima's Shotoku Pond in Edo, where early lotus blossoms unfurled. The water's surface rippled in golden light, a quiet salute to the generations of samurai who had guarded peace and honor. Under a simple canopy boat, Musashi's last disciples, now renowned across the domains, gathered with the elders of the Bushido Cultural Association to bid farewell to the first summer since the Go-Rin no Sho was widely published. Facing one another, they sipped fragrant lotus tea, listening to the soft splash of oars. Sugiura Ujinaga, Musashi's closest disciple and the Go-Rin no Sho's principal commentator, spoke gravely. "Our master taught that the ultimate victory is not slaying the enemy, but conquering one's own desires and pride. Today we honor his final words, so that samurai never forget. The sword is but a tool. The mind is our true essence." After tea, their boat landed, and the samurai assembled beneath the old bamboo grove by the shore. They carved a stone stele inscribed, "Bushido, unchanged by time or space. Blades may perish, but the mind sword endures. First, they offered incense at the ancestral altar, honoring Minamoto no Yoritomo, the first samurai's founder, Saigo Takamori, the last hero of the Bakumatsu, and Miyamoto Musashi, who penned the immortal warrior's scripture. As each bundle of incense rose, its smoke affirmed that though centuries pass, the samurai legacy lives on. Second, they performed the offering of the soul sword. Each samurai placed his blade on a wooden rack, bowed in unison, and pledged to preserve and spread Bushido to future generations, ensuring that modernization would never erode loyalty's spirit, even if the swords were sheathed. Their vow rang through the bamboo grove, mingling with the warbling of buntings, a hymn heralding a new beginning. At the ceremony's close, Sugiura presented each member with a handcrafted framed copy of the Gorin no Sho, alongside the newly published Wayfarer's Journal. Musashi's travel diaries now annotated. These books, he said, are more than pages. They are the compass for a samurai's life, whether on the battlefield, behind the desk, or in the dojo. That afternoon the samurai departed for their domains. Some returned to Kamakura, others to Aizu, and still more hastened over Hakone Pass. Along the new paved road from Edo to Shizuoka, they rode horseback, or in small carriages, bearing stone stelees and scrolls to gift to local dojo. Villagers welcomed them warmly, certain that though samurai forms may change, their spirit remains the people's steadfast anchor. As sunset flushed the bamboo by the pond, the taiko drums at Yasaka Shrine echoed across the water, a reminder that the final chapter of the samurai story was at hand. From the earliest saburai of the imperial court to Musashi the swordsman without sword, and now into a modern world, the journey of a warrior class neared its close. Yet their legacy, carried on by the Gorin no Sho and the spirit of Bushido, will forever call to hearts seeking to walk with the sword, undimmed by time or storm. As night fell over the capital, hundreds of colourful paper lanterns were lit for the Yoi no Yo closing festival, the finale of the Bushido heritage events. Crowds from every region gathered, each holding their copy of the Gorin no Sho and the ceremonial sword they had received, feeling deeply that though times change, the samurai spirit endures. Before the stage of polished ebony, elder samurai stepped forward one by one to offer final counsel to the youth. Sugiura Ujinaga spoke with measured gravity. The way of the warrior is infinite. Let every action, whether in the classroom, the council hall, or on the battlefield, be an opportunity to sharpen both mind and blade. Applause thundered like a triumphant hymn to an undying spirit. Next, a representative of the international Iaido class, a student from Brazil, read the pledge on behalf of practitioners from all 5 continents. We vow to preserve the Bushido legacy, to spread the values of loyalty, integrity, and courage, so that the way of the warrior accompanies humanity beyond all borders. Thousands of lanterns flickered in response, illuminating hopeful faces alight with resolve. Finally, the organisers released over 1,000 glowing balloons into the sky, like new stars heralding the next chapter, one in which samurai are not only found on battlefields or in dojos, but also as leaders, educators, and community founders, bringing the spirit of Bushido into every sphere of life. A final taiko drumroll concluded the ceremony. Thousands bowed their heads in remembrance of Miyamoto Musashi, Saigo Takamori, and the countless unnamed warriors who sacrificed for honour and freedom. In that sacred moment, everyone felt themselves a link in an unbroken chain, passing the warrior flame through the ages. As the crowds dispersed into the quiet night, inspiration lingered in the air. The ceremonial swords still gleamed, and the Gorin no Sho remained displayed under glass. Testaments that though history's pages may close, Bushido lives on in every heart, guiding each person through new challenges on the endless journey of mind blade and inner weapon. And so, the samurai story, from the first saburai, through Musashi's legendary era, to the modern world where sword and rifle stand united, completed its cycle, handing future generations a blazing torch, Bushido immortal, a heritage of all humankind.